So I'm very happy to be here today and to see so many people. As Karen mentioned, I hope this means that there'll be a lot of entries into the business plan competition in a few weeks. But the fact that we've got almost a full room here also kind of speaks to the topic that I'm talking about today. And that is about how to stand out from the crowd with your executive summary. Because you guys will be competing against anywhere from, I think we've had a record of over 100 entries before in the business plan competition. So you have to remember that there are going to be, the judges are going to be looking at your executive summary and comparing it to up to 100 or so other executive summaries. So you really need to kind of stand out in order for the judges to remember who you are. So what I'm going to talk about today first is what the mission of the executive summary is. Why do you bother with an executive summary? Why don't we just have you guys submit business plans? Secondly, I'm going to talk about the UMD business plan competition requirements in specific. The executive summary we're asking you to write for the business plan competition slightly different from what you might put together if you were applying to a venture capital firm. So I want to just talk about that a bit. Third, you always want to be very much aware of who your audience is and what the criteria that audience is using when they're looking at your executive summary. Because you want to write it to that audience. So I'm going to talk about that as well as some of the criteria that will be used in judging your executive summaries. Then I want to talk about a couple previous finalists in the business plan competition, talk about what made them successful as an example, and I'll refer to them throughout the rest of the talk as well. And then finally going to get into the nuts and bolts of what the components of an executive summary are. And then finally I'm going to recap with some of the do's and don'ts of writing the executive summary. And I don't know if this crowd is too big, but if there are questions that you have along the way, raise your hand and I'll try to address them. As long as it doesn't get out of hand, I'll try to do that. So first of all, what is the mission of your executive summary? Well, in this case, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's to stand out from the crowd. It's to let the judges remember you after they've read 100 of these different executive summaries. The key here is to get the reader to want to learn more about what you're trying to do. You've got 3 to 5 pages in this competition to really pique the curiosity of the judges. Now, how do you do that? Well, what you want to do is you want to provide enough information for the reader to really evaluate the risk and the return metric for what you're trying to do. This is what the judges are always going to be thinking about when they're looking through this. How much risk is involved with what this executive summary is what the team is trying to do. And how is the team trying to mitigate that risk? So you could have something that's very risky, but if you've got a plan to try and handle that risk, that can still be a very promising executive summary and business plan. You may have low risk, but you may have no plan to deal with that risk, and that's going to be a bad executive summary. You want to be able to address the questions that might come up in a judge's mind as they're reading the executive summary. That's how you stand out. Most executive summaries that I've read actually fail to do this. You might think this is just something pretty basic, but most executive summaries just don't provide enough information. And when I'm talking about risk, I'm talking about the 4 basic categories listed on the slide. First is the technical risk, right? So you've got to provide enough information to explain what are the technical risks involved here, how are you going to deal with those technical risks, and what the return is for tackling those risks. Same thing with the market. How tough is it going to be to crack this market? What are the opportunities available here? Sorry. And same thing with the team. You want to have a team that can really execute on the plan that you're presenting. So you want to be able to have a broad team and a deep team. Broad meaning you're covering the different spectrum of skill sets that are going to be necessary to do what you want to do, as well as having the depth of technical expertise, market expertise, financial expertise, etc. And then finally, you want to have be able to present what the financial risks are and what the financial opportunities are. So these are all things that you need to present in your executive summary concisely and convincingly so that the reader understands where you're coming from, how you're going to deal with it, and what the potential outcome will be. Okay, any questions? Yeah.
In developing your team, if you don't yet have, if you know exactly the type of partner you're looking for, the type of skill set you're looking for, but you have not confirmed whether that person will be on your team, how do you do that? How do you approach that in the plan? Like, you know what you're looking for, the skill set you're looking for, but you have not confirmed whether that person will come aboard.
That's an excellent question. At this stage of the competition, hopefully you've got most of your team set up, but even if you do have your team set up, you're going to know that there are going to be lapses in your team. You're going to have gaps there. I think it's important to identify that and say, look, we've got the finance guy, we've got the tech guy, we still need a sales and marketing guy, we still need someone else to do this or that, and identify that. But if you can say that these are the people you need and these are the characteristics you're looking for, that goes a long way to show the reader that, yes, I'm aware of the risks involved, that I don't have a full team, but I'm aware of that and I'm looking for that person. So I think that's an excellent question. Yeah, in the back?
Yeah. Suppose two teams, okay, provide you the information. And you guys think, okay, if these two teams are combined, that would be a very strong team. How do you deal with that kind of?
If you're trying to combine a team?
Yeah. So as an evaluator, okay, right? This team has a very strong technical, right? Okay, person, and this one has a manager, right? These are the competitors, but do you suggest why don't you guys?
Well, I think that's probably beyond the scope of this presentation, because I'm talking about how to do an executive summary, and you're talking about how to manage a team. So I don't know if that's the scope of this exercise, but I'm happy to talk with you later about that. One more question, and then I'll move on.
This covers the risk aspect. So you have technical risk, market risk. Where does the return part come in these four categories?
Where does the what part come in?
Because you're talking about risk versus return.
Right.
So the four topics that you talk about here is basically different risks involved in it.
Right. So with, for example, with technical risk, technical return, if you're able to say that we're going to solve these technical problems, this is the return that we're going to be able to get. Maybe that's 10 patents or something like that, and you're able to say we're able to exclude all these other potential competitors because of we're dealing with this technical challenge. On the market side, you can say, look, there's this huge opportunity that's growing. If we're able to fill that, it'll be a $100 million or $1 billion opportunity. Those are the kinds of things you want to talk about. Okay, and I'll get into these more as we're talking. This risk and return is really going to inform everything that we're going to talk about. It's a very important concept, probably the most important that I want you to walk away with after this talk. So the business plan competition requirements for the executive summary are first length, 3 to 5 pages, plus the contact sheet, right? So this is longer than your typical executive summary. It's almost kind of like a miniature business plan. Typical business plan is maybe 20 pages, 15 to 20 pages. Typical executive summary is usually maybe 2 pages, up to 3. But we're giving you an opportunity to present a little bit more than you would in a typical executive summary. But stay to this limit. Don't go over 5 pages because you'll be disqualified, right? And that includes all your tables and figures, right? That should be enough for you to present your argument. In fact, it's a little bit generous, I think.